Hi all. This one's going to be pretty quick. Now, just as a bit of a disclaimer, I'm actually a trader, not a coder. I actually got into trading a long time back, 21 years this year. So I suppose when COVID struck last year, I decided that I wanted to spend a bit of time kind of off trading as such and look at some of the tools available. And one of the great things with TradingView is you've actually got the ability to code indicators through a thing called PineScript. Some of you probably are aware of this. If you're already coding, this video is too basic for you guys. This is more of an introduction into what's kind of available, what you can do, how you can kind of start off with. So when I first started kind of the coding side, although I've got a bit of a technical background, I've never been a coder. It's always something that's fascinated me, but I just employ people to do it. So, when I started doing this myself, I really found it fascinating what PineScript kind of brings to the dynamic of TradingView as a whole. And what I'd like to do is to show you, how I got into this. And I'm going to start with something relatively simple. So instead of typing out loads of code, what I've done is I've already put what I've done as one of the indicators that we have, which is basically three moving averages kind of overlapped. So I'm just going to go line by line. So to start with, when you come down to the Pine editor, you've actually got the ability to create a new blank indicator. You can go a bit more complex and come into the strategies, but that's something for a little bit later on. And maybe our business partner, Paul, will kind of do another video similar to this with a little bit more advanced techniques. He's a bit more kind of code happy in terms of what he's a bit, able to do and the ability that he actually has. I think for me, I just like the simplicity of this. So I'm just going to get rid of the plot to start with because that's kind of irrelevant to where we are. So when we start with PineScript, we actually have obviously a blank um, tool. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to call this something else. I'm going to say example video indicator, and we're going to now save this to our tools. You see this now move now. We've instantly got a error message, and the error message is basically saying there's nothing in the code. So step one, obviously now I've got um, my title. I'm going to change the study to something else, maybe say example MAs for a lesson, and I'm going to keep it as Mayfair. So we basically have a version, and this is something that now comes standard. Version 4, when you're doing the new indicator, you've obviously got the author in terms of the indicator itself. Now, if you were to take from some of the public libraries that you have available, especially through TradingView, you'll actually see that some of the versions might not be compatible. Some of them have gone back, version 2, version 3. Now, when you start plugging in some of these codes into what you're trying to achieve overall, you can actually convert, if you save the indicator, convert it to a version 4, which will keep everything kind of up to kind of real speed, real time, and keep everything relevant. So, like I said, instead of typing anything out, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with the first line. So instead of building all three of these, I'm going to start with showing kind of one. So what we have is we have the length, first of all, and this is ultimately, I'm looking to build a moving average. So what I'm suggesting is the user can input here a length, and I'm going to change that to say 20. I'm going to have a min val. You can also set a maximum value as well, which would ultimately be a very similar piece of code there, just max val rather than min val. And then ultimately the title. So I'm going to show the fastest tool, um, 20, just to show obviously what you can change this to. Now, that's kind of the very basics. That's kind of step one. Now, again, if I go to add this to the chart, I'm probably going to get an error because ultimately there's nothing that it's doing, nothing that it's showing. It's not giving me any function in terms of the chart itself yet. So all I have right now is the ability to input what length I'm actually looking for, but I haven't specified just yet what the length equals to, what kind of source this is actually going to be. So the next line is actually going to be the source phase. So I'm going to come down to source one, and what I'm actually looking for here is actual input of the source. So I could have obviously open, high, low, close, what kind of series we're looking at here. So I'm just going to keep this as a close because it's, simple moving average. I'm going to show a fast source. I'm going to keep that exactly as we have right now. And then the next part is ultimately how we get some kind of output. So I'm going to use, just again, I've kept the name convention pretty straightforward for this example. So I'm going to look at the moving averages. Now, when you hover over this, we can actually see that we've got a little bit of information around what the function returns. We've obviously got the syntax and how this should actually be positioned out into the code itself. And obviously we can then look at how we can change this. So I'm going to say, actually, I'd like to change an an EMA to an SMA. And I'm actually going to then refer back to this being the SRC one, which obviously is the close position. So it's actually looking for the close of the simple moving average, and then ultimately the length that I've actually inputted into what we've actually got now for the length with obviously the close. So if I was to hover over these, there is actually a way that you can click on and see the potential options here. But obviously that's again for a bit more of a complex video. The general idea of this one is to keep it pretty simple to kind of get into step one. So at this point, I now have the length, I have the source, and I have the type of indicator / tool that I'm looking to obviously put there. Now, the next step obviously is to plot this. So all I'm doing here is coming into the plot situation of I want to plot the SMA, which is obviously the out one as I've called that. And if I change that to out 900, then all I'd need to do is change this to out 900. And ultimately, whatever I call this is what I'm looking to plot there. Now, at this particular point, I'm actually going to call this something else like plot one, and I'm looking for the color to be white. However, if I wanted to change the color, I can do a couple of things. I can obviously change the color, which would be the color dot, and then basically the color that you're looking for, or I could use the hash symbol. And I'm going to have this as a deep red. Now, I like this red. I use this a lot in some of my other indicators. So in essence, what I'm looking for right now is the plot of a 20 moving average at a close, which is going to be an SMA rather than an EMA. And that really gives me what I'm looking for. Now, and another thing I could add is this here, the line width. So I'm going to copy this out as well. And I'm going to stick this after the color, and it gives me a line width. I'm going to put line width 5 just to make it really obvious. So in essence, this gives me the very basics of an indicator. This is a simple SMA 20 as a whole, and I'm now going to try to add this to the chart and see what we get as a move into kind of step one indicator. So we've now actually got the indicator added to the chart. And the one problem we'll see immediately is that we've actually got a moving average which is off the chart itself. So the one thing that I have here, which I haven't really specified, is where I want this to be. Now, there's a couple of different ways to add scales and all kinds of things, but in essence, what we want here is an overlay, and we want this to be true on the chart. And at this particular point, I'm just going to delete this one off. And then I'm going to add this back to the chart, which will now give me the moving average on the chart itself. So that's obviously the simple way to add a moving average. Now I see a lot of people using 5 moving averages, 6 moving averages on a chart, and this is basically what this allows you to do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back and I'm going to add these in the lines. I'm just going to keep these as they are just for speed and simplicity. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in and I'm going to add this particular section to the code that we already have. And I'm going to go kind of line by line. So I'm going to come down one and I'm going to add this code in. So what I want now is I want let's just say a 15 moving average. I'm going to change the first one to 50. Now that's kind of line one. I'm going to call this a medium and I'm going to keep that there. So we have the lengths kind of predefined. I'm going to make a space so it's easier to see. And what I'm actually looking for now is the SRC. So I'm going to come down to SRC2. This is just to add a second moving average. I'm going to copy this one and I'm going to stick this in here. I'm also going to keep this as a close, and this time I'm going to have SRC2. I'm going to have this one as slower, and therefore we've got the second SRT put in. The next part of this is going to be, so you can see how I've just broken up the code. I've now got the lengths, I've got the sources, and obviously this gets more complex the further, the deeper, the more information that you're feeding into the code. This, like I said, was only just a simple example of showing how you can get into this. So I'm going to have out2, and I'm going to keep this as an EMA this time. So I now have an SMA 50 and an EMA 15. And therefore, I'm looking to, let's move this around, I'm looking to plot the next part of the sequence. And I'm looking for plot 2 there. And obviously, you can change the naming convention, you can change the line width, you can change more or less anything you want within this. So I'm going to call this one the same as what I have on the last one. So I'm going to call this a slower one. Actually, it's actually faster in terms of as a whole. But so actually, what I'll do then is, if that's the case, I'm going to do this one as a 15, and I'm going to call this one the 50. So as now a 15, I'm going to make this one be a line 2. I'm going to keep this as a gray. I'm going to change the line width, which equals 5 on this one, and I'm going to close that up. So now, if I get rid of the first moving average, what I've now gone and done is added a second moving average to the same code. You can see it's only a handful of lines. We're talking 15, 16 lines, and that's obviously with the spaces. So in essence, what I've done is I've put 2 moving averages on the chart. The overlay covers the both of them. We've got length for both of them. We've got the source for both of them. We got the actual instrument itself, so an SMA and an EMA. And then ultimately what we have is 2 different colors. So we've got obviously the first one being a smaller 15, second one being a larger 50. And therefore I'm going to use just the line width to show this as an example. So therefore we're now going to have a 50 in gray, line width 5, and this then could be added to the chart, giving us obviously the next part of the indicators. So we can use this for moving average crosses. We can use this for various strategies. We could put 100, we could put a 200, we can change the colors. So in essence, that's kind of, quick, short kind of intro into how to start off building indicators. And that's really all I wanted to cover in this particular lesson. So really, short and sharp. Obviously, TradingView's got, some really cool functionality, and you can build this to be as complex as you want. So we've actually got a bunch of indicators. If we look at what we've got in the scripts, we've got everything from accumulation. We've got some moving average type stuff. We got some combo ideas. There's some market strength indicators. We've actually got some gold tools, some Bitcoin tools. What else have we got? Supply, demand, some octave levels. So yeah, you can see we've built out quite a bit in the last kind of year or so. Obviously, some of these have been developed externally. We've got some developers that we use quite often. And in essence, when you get into the fundamentals of it, you can obviously, build up your capabilities the more you learn and get into this. Like I said, that's all I wanted to share for today. This was a real quick one. I hope that helps somebody out there. I know it's kind of basic if you're already coding, but the general idea was just to put the example out there. So have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you in some of the live streams in the next couple of days. Cheers all.